The rain hammered against the window, a relentless rhythm mirroring the unsettling feeling in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a profound disorientation. He remembered the car crash, the blinding headlights, then nothingness, just nothing. And then abruptly he was there, not in a hospital room, not surrounded by concerned faces, but bathed in an impossible light. A warmth permeated everything, a sense of absolute peace that defied description. It happened so quickly, yet it felt like an eternity. He saw colors he'd never known existed, heard music without any source, a symphony composed solely within his awareness. He recalled snippets of conversations, faces from his past, not with the sharp clarity of memory, but as echoes resonating through this luminous space. It was intensely familiar and utterly alien at the same time. The experience left him shaken, undeniably altered. Doctors attributed it to a traumatic brain injury, suggesting some kind of neurological anomaly, a temporary lapse in consciousness. But something wouldn't let him accept that explanation. The details were too vivid, too real. It wasn't just a dream or a hallucination. This isn't an isolated case. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, have reported similar experiences. Near-death events often described as journeys to another realm. They consistently speak of encountering loved ones who have passed, feeling an overwhelming sense of forgiveness and acceptance, and perceiving a reality beyond the confines of our physical world. Scientists are beginning to explore these accounts, seeking potential explanations rooted in neurological phenomena. Brain scans during NDEs reveal activity in areas associated with vision, emotion, and memory, even when the patient is clinically dead. Researchers propose theories involving altered states of consciousness, quantum entanglement, or even the possibility that our brains continue to function in a limited way after biological death. But these explanations, while fascinating, leave a lingering sense of incompleteness. They describe how certain neural processes might occur during an NDE, but they don't address the fundamental why. Why does consciousness seem so resistant to the limitations of the physical body? Consider this: our current understanding of reality is built on the assumption that matter is all there is, that our experience is entirely shaped by the activity within our brains. Yet, if consciousness exists independently of a functioning brain, where does it reside? What governs its existence? And what happens to it when our physical bodies cease to function? The question of where and what has haunted humanity for millennia. Religious texts offer comforting answers: the promise of an afterlife, a reunion with loved ones in a divine realm. But these narratives often rely on faith rather than empirical evidence. Perhaps the key lies not in dismissing either science or spirituality, but in seeking a bridge between them. Could there be a way to reconcile our understanding of the physical world with the undeniable experience of consciousness beyond death? The brain is an incredibly complex organ, a universe contained within our skulls. We've barely begun to scratch the surface of its mysteries. And yet these NDEs, these glimpses into what might lie beyond, suggest that there's more to reality than meets the eye. They raise a fundamental question. If consciousness can seemingly escape the confines of the physical body, does that imply the existence of something larger? Something else? The initial surge of warmth began to recede, replaced by a disconcerting chill. The luminous colors faded. The music dissolved into silence. He was back, in the sterile white of the hospital room, hooked up to machines that monitored his vital signs. The doctors' faces were etched with concern, their voices filled with relief. It felt like waking from a profound dream, one he couldn't quite shake off. Yet, the memory persisted, stubbornly refusing to be dismissed as mere delusion. It wasn't just what he had experienced, but the feeling of utter peace, the sense of connection to something beyond his individual self, that lingered with an unnerving clarity. It forced a reevaluation of everything he thought he knew about reality. Scientists have approached NDEs with a range of hypotheses, often focusing on physiological explanations: oxygen deprivation, neurotransmitter imbalances, and even temporary brain damage are frequently cited as potential causes. While these factors undoubtedly play a role, they struggle to account for the consistent reports of complex sensory experiences, vivid imagery, emotional breakthroughs, and seemingly impossible interactions with deceased loved ones. Consider the phenomenon of tunnel vision, commonly reported during NDEs. Individuals often describe seeing a dark tunnel stretching ahead of them, with a bright light at the end. This sensation isn't simply attributed to visual impairment. It's accompanied by feelings of profound peace and a sense of moving towards something significant. The brain typically associates darkness with fear or threat. Why would this be associated with tranquility? Then there's the issue of communication. Many NDEs report having conversations with deceased family members, individuals they hadn't seen in years. These encounters are described as remarkably natural and emotionally resonant, far exceeding the limitations of typical memory recall. How can memories from a lifetime away be accessed so vividly during a state of profound neurological disruption? The physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed a radical idea: participatory anthropic principle. He suggested that consciousness plays an active role in shaping reality itself. Our observations, he argued, aren't merely passively receiving information about the universe, they're actively contributing to its existence. Could this explain the subjective nature of NDEs? That our experience isn't simply a reflection of what is, but also a participation in creating it? Quantum mechanics offers tantalizing hints. The observer effect, for instance, demonstrates that. The act of observing a quantum system inevitably alters its state. If consciousness is fundamentally linked to observation, as some interpretations of quantum theory suggest, then perhaps our experience isn't confined to the limitations of the physical world, but extends beyond it. It's tempting to embrace purely materialistic explanations, to reduce NDEs to neurological anomalies, but dismissing these experiences entirely seems equally unsatisfactory. The sheer volume and consistency of reported phenomena demand a more nuanced understanding. Is it possible that our current models of reality are simply inadequate to encompass the full spectrum of human experience? The pursuit of answers, however elusive, is itself profoundly valuable. By exploring these mysteries, we're not just seeking scientific explanations, we're grappling with fundamental questions about who we are and what our place is in the universe. And perhaps, just perhaps, a deeper understanding might offer solace to those facing loss, hope for those yearning for connection, and a renewed sense of wonder at the extraordinary nature of existence. The implications of Wheeler's participatory anthropic principle were unsettling, yet undeniably captivating. If consciousness wasn't merely a byproduct of brain activity, but an active participant in shaping reality, then the very notion of objective truth, a cornerstone of scientific inquiry, came into question. Could our individual perceptions be fundamentally altering the universe around us? The concept of information theory offered another potential pathway to understanding. Physicist Giulio Tononi proposed that consciousness is intrinsically linked to the amount of integrated information within a system, essentially, how much difference a system makes. If this holds true, then consciousness might not be limited to biological organisms, but could potentially exist in any sufficiently complex system capable of processing and integrating information, even beyond our physical world. However, this wasn't simply about expanding the definition of consciousness. It challenged the assumption that consciousness requires a subject, a self, to experience it. Could consciousness be a fundamental property of the universe itself, existing independently of any particular entity? This echoes ancient philosophical debates about monism, the idea that reality is ultimately one substance or principle. Returning to NDEs, consider the reports of encountering guides or helpers in these experiences. While some might attribute this to subconscious memories or wishful thinking, it's equally plausible that these entities represent a form of consciousness, operating outside our conventional understanding. Perhaps aspects of a larger, interconnected network of awareness. The persistent theme of connection within NDE accounts is particularly intriguing. Individuals frequently describe feeling profoundly connected to all living things, a sense of unity and belonging far exceeding the boundaries of their individual identities. This resonates with spiritual traditions that emphasize the inherent divinity of all beings, suggesting a deeper truth about the nature of reality than we currently grasp. It's crucial to acknowledge the limitations of applying scientific models to phenomena that may lie beyond their scope. Reducing NDEs solely to neurological processes risks dismissing the profound subjective experiences reported by individuals. Yet, dismissing them entirely based on an inability to measure or quantify them is equally problematic. Perhaps the most valuable approach isn't to seek definitive proof of an afterlife, but to embrace the ambiguity and mystery inherent in these experiences, to recognize that our current understanding of consciousness and reality itself may be fundamentally incomplete. The persistent allure of these accounts speaks to a deep-seated human longing, a yearning for meaning, purpose, and connection, beyond the confines of our mortal existence. Whether rooted in neurological phenomena or something more profound, the the question of what happens after death remains one of humanity's oldest and most enduring mysteries. And it is precisely this persistent questioning that drives us forward, pushing the boundaries of knowledge and challenging our fundamental assumptions about ourselves and the universe we inhabit. The notion of a universal consciousness, an interconnected web of awareness permeating all things, felt both profoundly unsettling and undeniably elegant. It challenged the ingrained human tendency to compartmentalize existence into discrete entities, self versus other, observer versus observed. Yet, it also offered a potential explanation for the recurring theme of connection reported in NDEs, a sense of unity that transcended individual experience. Exploring the concept of nonlocality within quantum physics provided another intriguing thread. The observation that entangled particles, separated by vast distances, instantaneously influence each other's behavior, defied classical notions of cause and effect, suggesting a deeper interconnectedness at the fundamental level of reality. Could this non-local connection extend beyond the subatomic realm, potentially linking consciousness across space and time? Consider the anecdotal accounts of remote viewing, individuals claiming to perceive distant locations or events without relying on traditional sensory input. While often dismissed as pseudoscience, some researchers argue that these experiences might be indicative of a subtle form of non-local awareness, a capacity to access information beyond our conventional perceptual boundaries. However, simply proposing interconnectedness doesn't fully address the subjective experience of consciousness, the feeling of being, the sense of self that is so undeniably present within each individual. If all things are fundamentally connected, does this diminish the significance of personal identity? Or does it suggest a different kind of identity, one rooted not in separation, but in participation within a larger whole? Philosophical traditions like Advaita Vedanta propose an understanding of reality as ultimately non-dual, a single, undivided consciousness underlying all appearances. This perspective suggests that our individual sense of self is merely an illusion, a temporary manifestation within the greater unity of existence. While challenging to grasp intellectually, it aligns with the recurring theme of oneness reported in NDEs, and offers a framework for understanding subjective experience within a broader cosmic context. Yet, acknowledging this interconnectedness doesn't automatically resolve the mystery of death. If consciousness is indeed fundamental, what happens to it when the physical body ceases to function? Does it simply dissolve, returning to the universal source from which it emerged? Or does it transform, evolving into a different state of being within that same interconnected web? The debate surrounding NDEs ultimately forces us to confront our own deeply held assumptions about reality. It compels us to question the boundaries between mind and matter, consciousness and existence, pushing beyond the limits of scientific materialism and spiritual dogma. Perhaps the true value lies not in finding definitive answers, but in embracing the inherent ambiguity, in acknowledging that some questions may simply be beyond our capacity to fully comprehend. Ultimately, the persistent phenomenon of near-death experiences serves as a potent reminder that consciousness is far stranger and more profound than we currently understand. It's an invitation to explore the boundaries of human experience, both within and beyond the confines of our physical bodies, and to consider the possibility that death may not be an end at all, but rather a transition into a different form of awareness, a participation in something vastly larger and infinitely more mysterious. The relentless pursuit of answers regarding consciousness and potential afterlives ultimately yielded not a definitive conclusion, but a profoundly humbling realization. Perhaps the most significant discovery lies not in what we find, but in how we question. The very act of grappling with these mysteries reshapes our perspective, forcing us to confront the limitations of human understanding and embrace the inherent ambiguity of existence. Returning to the concept of participatory anthropic principle, it's clear that reducing consciousness to a purely mechanistic process, a product solely of brain activity, fails to account for the richness and depth of subjective experience. Instead, consider the possibility that consciousness is not simply within us, but rather interwoven with the fabric of reality itself, a dynamic interplay between observer and observed. The recurring theme of connection across NDEs suggests an inherent interconnectedness, a fundamental unity, beneath the surface of apparent separation. This isn't necessarily a comforting notion. It challenges our ingrained sense of individual identity, but it offers a compelling alternative to traditional narratives of death as a final, irreversible endpoint. Exploring nonlocality within quantum physics, alongside philosophical concepts like panpsychism and Advaita Vedanta, paints a picture of reality far more complex than our current models allow. It suggests that the universe is not a collection of isolated objects interacting through deterministic laws, but rather a unified field of consciousness, an ever-evolving tapestry of awareness. Yet, acknowledging this interconnectedness doesn't negate the profound sense of loss and grief experienced by those who have lost loved ones. The desire for connection, to bridge the gap between life and death, is a fundamentally human drive, rooted in our deep-seated need for meaning and belonging. Perhaps the true value of NDE accounts lies not in providing literal proof of an afterlife, but in validating these deeply felt emotions, in recognizing that the yearning for connection transcends the limitations of physical reality. Ultimately, the quest to understand consciousness and death is less about finding a single answer, and more about cultivating a deeper appreciation for the mystery itself. It's about embracing the paradox, acknowledging both the profound beauty and unsettling uncertainty of existence. The relentless pursuit of knowledge can be a powerful force for growth, but it must be tempered with humility, recognizing that some questions may ultimately remain beyond our grasp. Consider this: if consciousness is indeed a fundamental aspect of reality, then death may not represent an ending at all, but rather a transition, a shift in perspective within the ongoing flow of cosmic awareness. It's a transformation from one state of being to another, a return to the source from which we emerged, yet simultaneously retaining a connection to the vast and interconnected web of existence. Perhaps the greatest takeaway isn't a definitive answer about what happens after death, but rather a renewed sense of wonder, a recognition that our individual lives are inextricably linked to something far greater than ourselves. And in embracing this perspective, we may find solace, meaning, and a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of each fleeting moment. This video has come to an end, but the discovery continues. Check out more content on the channel and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thank you for watching.